This is the final version of the engine mounts required to put in a sharan gearbox or a Galaxy gearbox into a T4 attached to mine's. That's an AFN engine, which is basically the same as an AHU and a 1Z. This would also fit a ABL, but I don't think an ABL is going to have the power to use the gearbox, because you know your ratio is going to change so much. This by my calculations, we should cruise at 70 at about 2.1, something like that, which obviously is a big improvement from I think 2.6. That's what my box cruises at, and it's currently, and it's got the 5th gear mod in it. So a few things. So what I've done is I've got these cadded up, these plates, so I can provide the steel with these. You'll get that, and you'll get this. Now the only thing I can't do is I can't cut the holes on, because it will just take too much work for me to do that. So you're still going to be left with having to weld it all together, basically. Get it in the van, see how it looks, and drill these holes. You can see what I've got here on mine is because originally this was flush with there, and when I came to do the drive shafts, I decided it would look a bit better if I dropped the box slightly. So I ended up putting in that's probably about a 10mm shim. Now the holes on the gearbox, they're not for these mount plates. They're not all at the same height, so you have to have spaces anyway. So I've just got some basically 10mm ID mild steel tube, which I welded on basically to get the height. Added this strap in afterwards because I was a bit concerned that there was quite a lot of leverage on one of these engine mounts, so I put that on afterwards. I don't think it'll be an issue. That's a standard T4 gearbox mount. So come around here. So this was, I haven't cadded this up. This is, you'll just have to fabricate that. It wasn't too difficult. That's just 6mm mild with some things. I mean, if I could do it again, I got these a little bit close to there, so it was a bit. So you have to do these with a spanner. But that one goes to socket on. That one doesn't. You have to get a spanner on that. But I mean, it's pretty easy fabrication, really. One thing you do have to be careful of is when you do this plate here, if you can see, I had to cut a bit of a V in it, because what I didn't want was having to, if I had to change this, I didn't want to have to take this off, because it would be a pain to get a spanner at the back. So I've cut a V, and basically you undo these nuts here, that spins around, and then you can pull the whole thing out. So that's simple enough. So this is the original T4 mount for an ABL, off an ABL engine. Now, basically, it was quite fortunate in that it still sits in the right place, but it is a bit long. So that's essentially what I had to cut off and get a hole through here. Now that is a bit of a nightmare, if I'm honest, because you're coming through the quite a thick bit, and I snapped a few drill bits, but basically all you've got to do is get a big hole through. I mean, I think we got a big hole through, and then I just welded a big washer to the top. Once it was in position, we hung it on the engine mount in the van, and that was sliding around. We just got a tack on, basically, and it was at the right angle, and Bob's your uncle. Now, one thing I didn't realise was this thing's actually filled with fluid. I didn't realise that, and I didn't, because this is actually not as that's not as thick as that. So you have to cut this bolt down. If you don't cut it down, what happens is you puncture the fluid thing inside, and it leaks. So I had one that was painted lovely in orange, and now I don't, basically. That was a bit annoying. So that just bolts up there. You have to take off, there's some little locating tangs on here. You have to take those off. Doesn't really matter, to be fair, because they're only really there for when they're assembling in the factory. I mean, you can spare 10 seconds to align it in the van, so it's not really an issue. What else? Where are we at? So we'll do the drive shafts now. So this is standard sharan Galaxy. You get that flange. Now this bit here, this bit is actually the original part of the original sharan drive shaft. Now the sharans don't use CVs, they use these tri-lobe joint things. So this is basically what that started off looking like, and the tri sort of lobe thing slides in and out of there. Now what I've done is I managed to cad up a plate, this inner one here, which fits snugly around here. Once it's on, there's not actually much play in it at all. You can slide a fag packet between each side, really, bagged paper. So I had anticipated this a bit longer. I might have done it a different way, but this worked out fine, really. So basically, when I got it in the van, I set it up. Now this basically from the back edge of this plate to the front edge of that plate. I'll measure it actually. Back edge is 45, so I set this plate up here, this front one, at 35, because these are 10mm, 35, and welded it on the back. Welded it on the back, and that essentially gives you the bolt. That's got the bolt holes in it, and then this front plate is just a spacer, because you need something for the so the CV can slide in and out, so it doesn't clash with anything in there. And it probably would have clashed with these lobes, so I put this on. You don't need to weld that on. I chose to, just so I'm not juggling it. For setting, when you're welding this on, I just got a tack in there, and then I had some nicer ones than these, to be fair. These are my rough ones, but essentially just set it all the way around to get it at 35 off the front, so it was nice and square, because you don't really want a huge deviation. Now I don't suppose it will really matter, if I'm honest, because that joint's designed to flex. Obviously this isn't a balanced assembly. That is a tiny concern for me, but these actually don't spin that fast when I did the calculations, so I'm not too worried about any balance issues. I mean, the other option is I could, because the distance is so thin, I could probably get an adapter plate made to go directly onto here, which would be, I think the most I can get done is 25mm. And then I could get a 20mm adapter, so you could do that as well. But the problem is drilling, is countersinking large holes, and these M10 is an absolute nightmare. Like this, I tried to do on version 1 or 2 of this plate. I tried to countersink myself, and it was impossible. So I had to find that out. So anyway, I think this is going to work well enough, to be fair. So that's this side, really. So when you get your box, you want to make sure you get at least one drive shaft with it, so you end up with one of these, basically. I mean, this is the section I cut off. You can see. You probably want to clean it out before you start cutting it, because it'll catch fire. This is the other plate, which is just a straight bolt-on plate, and you can countersink some holes and blast these straight in, and then you've got your things, and there's enough space there to put sliding out of anyway, so it's not an issue. So gear shift wise, now you don't have to do this, but I did do it because it improves the situation ever so slightly. Because obviously I brought the cables into the cab and went for a centre console, because you'll see when you ever look at the shift mechanism, it's very difficult to modify it to have it in the original position and end up with a reasonable gear shift. The ones people have done them in the floor, it's going to happen it's going to be probably worse than it was before the shift is. So anyway, I raised this up just to get a better angle as the cable's into the cab. That's about probably 10 or 12mm spacer on there, and then this bit here is quite close to the brake pipes in the van, so I just cut that off to get some clearance on there. There's plenty of flex in this, so it's not a massive issue. What else? So obviously I had to modify this pipe here. This is the original ABL item, but you have to clear the plate now, so I had to add in a section of pipe here just to bring it out to clear the plate. And then a few of the original takeoffs were in the wrong place, so that one there moved to here, that one there just moved an inch back and to the left. What else? A few other things. So you've got to get top dead centre, and I've done a separate video on how I got that, because this box rotates it, and I don't have the original information as to where the it was too quick. The easiest way to do it was just I had the sump off. I've got a separate video, and basically set a DTI up on the bottom of one of the rods, and then you set top dead centre, and then you just get in. I just got in there, got a little mark in there, and put a bit of red nail polish, I think, actually on it, just to so you can see it, because you don't want problems when you come to retime the engine. I mean, the other way of doing it, if you didn't want to do all that, would be to you'd have to mess about with the gearboxes, take the original one off. You'd have to, when you bring it out of the van, if you're not doing a fresh install like me, you could get the van set at top dead centre before the gearbox comes off. The only problem you've got is obviously once you pull the gearbox off, you might twist it. So I think probably the DTI method's probably still better. Turbo wise, I've obviously gone for a custom setup with a bigger turbo, but there would be definitely enough room to get the original standard ABL turbo setup on the back here. And there's loads of room back here because the engine's actually canted forward, so you could probably go with some different options. Maybe a PD 130 or 150 setup. I've never tried it, but there's plenty of room back there now. Dipstick wise, because the engine's canted forwards more, this, when it's all bolted in, hits the radiator. So obviously this originally has got a solid piece of thing. It doesn't go around the bends well. So what I did was I basically bought a generic dipstick off eBay and just welded it on, set the levels. I mean, I've got to do a little bit of work there, but essentially I had the sump off, looked where it was all going to end up, and marked some marks on there. I'm going to confirm that by putting the advised amount of oil in to see where it falls, just to check I'm not bald, but I'm fairly confident I've got that okay. What else? That's about it really. Doesn't really have to do any other modifications. I've got these wires set up ready to mount into my harness. My original gearbox cable actually comes from a multi-plug in my other engine, which is not present in this one, so I'm just going to tee this into the van wiring and probably put a connector on there for that, and then I've got to pick up the reverse one. So obviously this is my adapter plate. One of the nice things I did manage to get done is I had a laser cut stainless cover that goes on there. Annoyingly, I didn't put enough holes in the plate, but I've got enough holes to hold it. But if I do, when I release the version, I'll have extra M6 holes there. That'll be child's play to lock it down. What else? When you're slotting the engine in, this drive shaft, you have to sort of juggle it in at the same time. Unless you're going to take drive shafts out the van completely, you have to juggle it in with the box, which is a nightmare. Like, so I've had to get this out a couple of times on my own, put it back in again, and it is a nightmare because you have to juggle that drive shaft in at the same time. Otherwise, you can't clear it in. This one you don't have to worry about when you slide the engine, worrying about the drive shaft, because you can get it, clear it up and get it in. The only thing is, if I had the power steering pump assembly on here, you wouldn't be able to slide, so it's got to be bolted on first, then the power steering goes back on. In the van wise, I mean, you're going to, like, your existing exhaust is not going to line up anymore, so I mean, what I did, that fucking awful clamp that was there originally, I mean, that was literally the work of the devil. I cut it off. I've got like a 50mm 2-inch, I think this is 2-inch pipe, 50 flex on there, and then just welded a V-band onto the end, and V-band, oh my god, it's so much better. Oh, this is the lower engine mount here. I mean, it's very simple. I've got a separate video on that, on some measurements. I mean, that's fairly easy. Obviously the standard box has actually has a damper built into it there, but there's absolutely loads of flex in that thing, so I've got no worries that there's not enough damping in there, so I'm not worried about that. I've got the shocks off at the minute because I'm painting. You don't need to take the shocks off. The only thing I had the shocks actually just unbolted for, so I could slide the drive shafts in and out. Otherwise you can leave them on, but I just decided to address some little bits of rust that are forming up there. It's my standard cables, which I shortened, so you don't really touch this end. It's all the shortening's done at the far end. I've got a separate video on sort of how I went about doing that. Now these are sharan ends. That I wonder if mine are different to other boxes, because when I've looked at other sharan boxes, they come with this sort of standard sort of golf ends on them. But I mean, these are pretty good, to be fair. You just pop them on and off. Happy enough for that. That's where the hole sort of went through. This is obviously where I had to cut that thing off to clear that, because it was, it's floating quite close to these. So I've clearance around the house with a fair bit of clearance, but the spacer is so, the little space I've added is so that these aren't quite as a tight angle, because it's a little bit tighter than normal. So the shift does spring back to like the neutral position, but it's not quite as fluid as I imagine it would have been as standard. That's about it really. I'm going to try and slide it back in on my own today. See how we get on, but yeah, this is hopefully the last time I have to get it out of the van, so I thought I'd record it all.